Hey everyone, I thought I'll share a quick deal and a tell me breakdown from the field today. This one is interesting because it's not about a net new logo or a sudden RFP. It's about how a dormant enterprise account moved from roughly 200K ARR to more than 2 million ARR in about 18 months. And the funny thing is, the whole motion didn't start with a big opportunity. It started with something much more ordinary, a renewal. Most enterprise expansion actually doesn't begin with new customers. Renewal cycles often provide the best opportunity to step back and rethink how a platform fits into the organization. So today, I'll walk through a repeatable motion I've seen across multiple enterprise accounts, especially in environments where identity, security, and infrastructure decisions involve many stakeholders. Before getting into the steps, it's worth understanding something about enterprise deals. Large deals don't move because a quarter is ending. They move when organizations are ready. And readiness usually comes from several things aligning all at once: architecture reviews, risk and compliance discussion, budget planning cycles, internal leadership alignment, and procurement governance. Interestingly, renewal windows tend to bring many of these stakeholders together at the same time, which is why renewals can become strategic checkpoints, not just commercial events. And that's exactly what happened here. So, let me start with the context of the account. When we begin this motion, the account wasn't particularly active. It was a dormant account generating around 200K in annual revenue. The deployment existed, but it was relatively narrow in scope. Like many other enterprise environments, the organization had evolved over time. New applications had been introduced. Security expectations had changed. Different teams had built solutions in parallel, but the identity platform had never been reassessed holistically. So, instead of approaching the renewal as a routine contract extension, we treated it as an opportunity to step back and evaluate the environments properly. The first step in this motion was introducing a strategic price uplift at the time of renewal. Now, this isn't about arbitrarily increasing pricing. The intent is to reposition the engagement. When a platform is originally deployed in a limited way, the commercial model often reflects that smaller footprint. But over time, the platform can become much more central to the organization's architecture and security posture. A renewal becomes that moment to realign the commercial model with that strategic importance. And when done carefully, this step changes the tone of the conversation. Instead of negotiating a contract extension, the organization begins asking much bigger questions. Is the current operating model sufficient for where we need to go next? And when that question appears, the conversation moves beyond pricing and into strategy. The second step was embedding a structured health check into the renewal cycle itself. Rather than simply renewing the contract, we proposed a full reassessment of the environment as part of the engagement. The health check examined several areas: architecture design, security controls, access governance models, regional inconsistencies, and operational complexity. The goal wasn't to sell additional license, but the goal was actually to create clarity. Where are the gaps? What risks exist? What would a stronger operating model look like? Once those insights are documented clearly, the conversation naturally shifts from product features to risk posture and organizational strategy. And that's where enterprise discussions really begin. The third step was exposing the gaps and the broader risk posture. When the findings from the health checks were shared internally, several things became visible. Some architectural inconsistencies, certain governance gaps, operational complexity across regions. None of these issues were catastrophic, but collectively they revealed something very important. Identity was already critical to the organization's operations. It just hadn't yet been treated as a strategic platform. And that realization changed how the organization began thinking about identity, not just as a tool supporting individual applications, but as a control layer across a larger enterprise. The fourth step was about activating the right internal champion. Enterprise expansion rarely happens because the vendor pushes harder. It happens because someone inside the organization carries the message. The champion's role is not to sell your product internally. Their role is to translate the strategic implications of what the organization is saying. They help socialize the health check findings. They align architecture teams, security leadership, and operational stakeholders. And they help leadership understand why identity should evolve beyond a local deployment. Without that internal momentum, expansion becomes extremely difficult. With the right champion, alignment starts to build organically. The fifth step was establishing a CXO level roadmap alignment. Once internal momentum builds, the conversation naturally moves upward. At this stage, we focused on activating leadership relationships on both sides. These discussions were not product demonstrations, they were roadmap conversation. Three things typically get agreed at this level. First, the strategic role identity should play across the entire organization. Second, the scope of transformation or standardization. And thirdly, a phased roadmap for how that evolution will occur. Once leadership on both sides align around that roadmap, the relationship shifts. Identity is no longer seen as a tool being renewed, it becomes a strategic platform-led conversation. The final step is sequencing the expansion. Large enterprise programs rarely expand in one move. They evolve through phases. First, stabilizing the architecture. Then, expanding coverage across priority systems or regions. And eventually, standardizing identity posture across the organization. That sequencing builds confidence internally and allows procurement to support the evolution. In this case, that process expanded the account from roughly 200K ARR to more than 2 million ARR in about 18 months. Not through aggressive selling, but through alignment. So the main takeaway here is simple. Enterprise expansion rarely happens because you push harder. It happens when diagnosis, internal champions, and leadership alignment create a shared roadmap. And renewal windows are often the moment where that alignment begins. I'm still learning the craft every year, but this motion has repeated itself across several enterprise accounts. Hopefully, this breakdown of the deal anatomy is useful for anyone operating in long cycle enterprise environments.